Ga je weer laten starten? Ja. Oké, starten.
Goedemiddag. Dank u wel om terug plaats te nemen. Dan gaan we nu over naar het tweede deel van de namiddag. We hebben een heel interessante groep sprekers die ons iets gaan vertellen over aardobservatie, data en applications voor een space economy. Dat is Els Knaeps van VITO, samen met Tanja van Achteren. Dan is er ook Victoria Jadot van Eurosense en Bart Desoete van OIP. Welkom.
Okay, thank you very much. For this presentation, we are going to zoom in a bit more concretely on some actual applications on Earth, and which maybe is also recognizable in your daily life. We have indeed 4 speakers, Els Knaeps, my colleague also from VITO, and Victoria from Eurosense, and Bart from OIP. And we will each present a small use case very concretely, and which is also related to the grand societal challenges that are currently ongoing. And finally, also Bart will also go a bit to more detail on the type of instruments, so the Earth observation instruments that you use to do this type of applications. So this is basically an introduction that has been mentioned already many times today. So space is really an enabler for progress towards societal goals, and is also a real socio-economic actor, not only in the space industry itself, but also indirectly for space-based added value services in a broad range of sectors, for example, agriculture, infrastructure monitoring, insurances, security, dredging, etc., and also to provide services to the government itself, and especially in the context of climate change and monitoring our natural resources. Earth observation is becoming a really big component in this part. So it's also a collaboration between industry, research, government, and citizens, as we will show later on. And of course, it's a magnet for STEM education, as already mentioned many times. We have 4 use cases. One is, the first one is on circular economy in the built environment, which I will present myself. Then Els will present something on digital transformation in ports. Victoria will present something on inland access water monitoring, and finally Bart on optical instruments. So first of all, the circular economy. What is the circular economy? It's becoming more and more important. Traditionally, when, for example, in the construction sector, we get raw materials from natural resources. For example, wood to make doors, to use in the construction phase. But the planet's resources are limited, and this is becoming really more and more a reality. Anybody who has some experience with renovation or with building a house, you will have encountered and seen that prices are increasing a lot lately. And this is because the raw materials are depleting at a fast rate. So circular economy is turning that around. So it tries to reuse the materials that are used in a product and reuse it either for also in the construction sector, for example, but also for other types of applications, or even for artists to build new art pieces. But this is another way of thinking, and also the whole economic sector has to change that. So One important part is digital information. So you need to have a view on the inflows and the outflows of materials, either from the raw materials, but also in the economic sector itself, in the building sector. So to zoom in a bit on this construction sector, it consumes, not many people know that, but it consumes the highest share of the materials globally and represents the highest share of local waste production. So to put some numbers on that, 35% of all waste that is produced is from the construction sector. 40% of consumption of virgin materials is in the construction sector. 33 to 50% of greenhouse gases are from the construction sector. So it's a very important sector to do something about this problem. So in this presentation, I just show a small example how we can see the building stock as an urban mine. So the building stock is basically our existing houses, buildings, infrastructure. And we use that for secondary materials. So first of all, how can Earth observation be used for that? So first of all, we need to keep an eye on the global natural resources. And we can do that with open access satellite imagery as is provided, for example, by the Sentinel missions of ESA. This is an example of the world cover map, which gives a global land use map of the whole world. So in quite high detail of 10-meter resolution, you know, is there forest there? Is there urban areas there? Is there agriculture there, etc.? So by keeping this kind, creating this kind of map over time, you can keep an eye on how natural resources are depleted or coming back. And so that's one application of how Earth observation can be used there. Secondly, if we zoom in a bit further with high-resolution imagery or with, for example, radar imagery, we can monitor much more in details construction and demolition activities. So we are going a bit more closely, and we can start to monitor the inflows and outflows of construction activities, really locally of individual buildings and areas. This can be done with high resolution imagery, but also then comes also other types of information, more terrestrial ones, airborne imagery, etc. And you can use this type of imagery to make an inventory of the materials that are available in the city, for example. And finally, a small example where we go even more in detail. We use terrestrial mobile mapping data. In this case, this is Google Street View imagery, but it can be any mobile mapping data source, where we use artificial intelligence to map the facades of individual buildings. So you can just drive through the city or use the open source like OSM data or Google Street View data and map the materials of individual buildings. And this gives some statistical estimation of how much materials are present on average in a city. And this is an important information for policy making for cities to help create policies of locating material hubs, for example, where materials will come in and can be bought again to be used in new construction environments. So this is a concrete example, and which was also applied on the city of Leuven, the nicest city of Flanders. I hope this gives a more better view on this type of application. I would like to give the word now to Els, who will tell something on the application of Earth observation in the Port of Antwerp.
Good afternoon. So from the circular economy to the ports, the ports where there is a real digital transformation actually ongoing. For instance, if you look in Flanders to the Port of Antwerp, we really see that the port is investing a lot in digital innovation. For instance, they are developing a real digital twin of the port. They are going to use autonomous drones in the port. investing in smart cameras, also in a 5G network. And this need for digital transformation is actually coming from, first, a business perspective, an increase in operational excellence, an increase in capacity and efficiency of the port operations. Secondly, also the migration of transport networks to lower cost regions. So this means that in Western Europe, they have to do a cost reduction, and also the development of new data-driven business models. Now, how can Earth observation support this digital transformation in the ports? I think they can support us in several ways. First of all, a direct win in the optimization of the operational logistics. For instance, a better berthing and a more efficient berthing of ships at the quay, and I will show an example later on. Cost savings, for instance, an earlier detection of oil spills, resulting in a cheaper cleaning intervention. Increase in sustainability by monitoring nature reserves, but also, for instance, monitoring the plastics in the water. And overall, an increase in safety, just because the personnel doesn't have to go in the field anymore. A first example of oil spill detection. On the left, you see an example of a drone-based solution. On the right, it's an example based on a satellite image. The left is actually, I want to refer to a new project that actually just started here in Flanders. It's a nice collaboration between the Port of Antwerp and different industrial partners, financed by the Blue Cluster. And the idea of the project is actually to develop an operational methodology based on drones, an autonomous grid of drones, with smart cameras to actually in real time detect an oil spill, characterize the oil spill, so what type of oil it is, and how the oil spill moves, and also send in real time an alert to a cleaning company. This all actually to have a cheaper cleaning operation and reduce the cost for the port. At the right-hand side is actually a satellite image, a radar image, and it's from an oil spill in the Belgian coast. It's an area near Zeebrugge. So it's another way of detecting oil spills. Of course, we can only detect a spill when the satellite passes over, but the radar, it's an active technique. So this means, and we can also look through the cloud, so not dependent on any cloud cover. A second example is related to the ship berthing and the increase in operational efficiency. On the left-hand side, again, an example based on drones. On the right-hand side, again, example based on satellite data. So you can see the drone image that was collected along the quay wall. And on the bottom, you actually see a three-dimensional representation of one of the ships that was moored at the quay wall. And you see also all the water, the quay wall, and everything is actually filtered out. Based on this 3D model, we can actually derive the exact dimensions of the ship up to centimeter level. The right-hand side, a similar application where you see on top a very high-resolution satellite image, and the green dots, they show you all the ships that were present at the time that the image was collected. Beneath, you see again one of the ships with the quay wall and the water filtered out, and at the right-hand side, you see the contours of the ship. Again, we can derive the dimensions and the position of the ship based on this data. Of course, with drones, we can do it at much higher accuracy than with the satellite. And this kind of information is really essential for the port because it allows to have a better ship berthing, a more efficient berthing of the ships at the quay wall. So I hope this gives you a little bit an idea of the type of application we can support and how we can support the Port of Antwerp or other ports in Europe. I give the word to Victoria.
Thank you, Tanja and Els, for the two first presentations. And now from my side, I will give a third, a very concrete example where Earth observation can be used to solve some of the problems that we are facing here on Earth. And very specifically, my example will be about the monitoring of inland excess water. I think that we all realize that floodings and heavy rainfalls are a very actual problem that we have to face, and so Earth observation can help in monitor these areas of excess water. Here, what you see here on the slide is the final result. It's a screenshot of the final result. It's actually a geodatabase where all the water areas have been mapped, and also the volume of the water areas have been automatically defined. And so in the next slide, I will explain to you how we arrive to this final result, which steps we have to undertake. So what we have developed, actually, it's an innovative combination of satellite imagery and airborne data. And by combining these two data sources, we can monitor inland excess water when there is, for example, heavy rainfall, but also when in summertime ice from mountains in certain areas in Europe melts, comes down to the lower related areas, and in some specific cases the ground doesn't have enough capacity to absorb this water, and then on agricultural ground you have a lot of excess water that remains there, and it's important to identify these areas and also to have an idea of the volume of the water. So in the first step, before analyzing the satellite data, we make a 3D model, a digital surface and a digital terrain model of the project area, the area that we want to monitor. And we do this with airborne technology, so with aircraft, with LiDAR technology. And so we have a really good overview, really good view on the 3D situation, how it is before there are any floodings. And then after the floodings, of course, it's important to react very quickly, and sometimes there are still clouds available, so it's important to use a data source that can, as we say, see through the clouds. So we work with radar technology, with the Sentinel-1 data, and we have a first idea of the rough 2D water polygons, which will then further be fine-tuned with orthophotos, so imagery coming from aircraft, to validate these. And with the 3D model that we had at the beginning of the project, we can calculate the volume of the water at a certain area. And the eventual aim, the objective of such a project is to support the water engineers. Instead of sending people on the terrain to identify and to control if there really are some water ponds, and also it's quite difficult for these people to give an estimation of the volume. Well, with such a new innovative technology, you can calculate that in an automatic way and a lot faster, and you will have a more reliable results. So here on the right of the slide, you see what we call a DTM, digital terrain model, with the inland water spots, which has been automatically detected, which are highlighted in white. So here I will go to the different steps of such a process quite quickly. And so the first one is a Sentinel-1 image that we see here, where we have a rough 2D water polygon highlighted in blue. Then there are some processes that are applied to this, and we will smooth the water polygon. We will make it a 3D water polygon, because we will include the LiDAR data that we had acquired at the beginning. And eventually, in the end, we arrive at a database of the water spots with as attributes, so with extra information on the volume of each of these water spots. And this can be visualized, for example, in a GIS software, as was done here, and this is just a screenshot of the result, of course. And this is a short video that shows evolution over time. In dark blue, we have the water spots that were already present, permanent water spots, and in light blue, we identify the inland excess water. We've also taken into account the rainfall that you can see on the right, and the temperature, as this can also have an impact on areas where there is excess water, as it's not only due to heavy rainfall, as I explained in the beginning. So this was, in short, one other application where Earth observation can be used to monitor a situation on Earth and to give extra information without having to go on the field, without having to go on the terrain, but really being able to have some objective data from behind a computer screen, actually. Okay, thank you. Now I leave the word to Bart.
Good afternoon. After these very interesting examples of Earth observation applications, I will briefly touch upon optical instruments, some important aspects of it, and some examples of what has been developed at OIP. Okay. So, what does it take to develop a space instrument? First of all, of course, we listen to the customer. What are the user needs? Typically, a user wants to observe something on Earth or wants to analyze something. Then we go together with the customer into the deep technological aspects. We look at what is technologically achievable. We come up with a system architecture, and we derive some technical specifications. Of course, for a space instrument, there are some very critical aspects. One of them is that a satellite needs to survive for a long time, and there's no way to repair it. There are, of course, some counterexamples like the ISS or the Hubble Space Telescope, but in general it's not possible. So you need to guarantee a long lifetime, and this has a lot of implications for the design. You need to take into account a lot of test conditions in all levels of the development. The second important aspect is that a space instrument needs to survive in very harsh conditions in space. For example, it needs to be launched on a rocket, which is not a very smooth ride. Second, it needs to survive thermal fluctuations, it needs to survive radiation. All of this needs to be taken into account. It is analyzed by all the disciplines available, all the engineering disciplines available in the company, and also the test campaigns need to take into account all these harsh conditions. In terms of Earth observation, I will give you two examples. Two classes, in fact, of instruments. The first one is Earth observation itself, which is, in fact, looking at the Earth's surface. This can be vegetation, this can be water or any other type of object you want to observe. But it's not only the surface that can be monitored. Also, in fact, the atmosphere, so the gases of the Earth, can be monitored by optical spectrometers. So spectrometers are able to detect different types of gases by looking at their signature, so the way they absorb light in a certain wavelength. For example, CO2, so carbon dioxide, which is the big culprit of the climate crisis, will be looked at with the CO2M mission, which is going to be launched in a couple of years from now. So, first example, Earth observation. The first parameter that is important there is the global coverage. So you want to make sure that the image, an image is taken of every point of the Earth sufficiently fast. As to give you an example, the Proba-V instrument, which can be seen at the left, has a very wide field of view and is able to see more than 2,000 kilometers when it passes over the Earth. This means that in a few days it will cover the whole Earth. Another means is, of course, to send a large constellation of satellites in space, and this is typically done with CubeSats. An example there is the VGT companion CubeSat. The second aspect, which is typically conflicting with the first, is that you want to see a high resolution. You want to make sure that every pixel you see is sufficiently small. Typically in the orders of meters or tens or hundreds of meters. And therefore, typically, a large focal distance is used, which has, of course, an impact on the size of the instrument. The size of the instrument needs to be small enough for satellites because of the high cost of a launch. So these two first parameters are typically conflicting. And then, of course, important is to make stable images. Stable images means a stable platform. The satellite needs to be controlled well, but also the instrument itself needs to be always looking at the same point over the whole temperature range and in all conditions. And finally, you want to make sure that you cover different wavelengths. So you want to look in the ultraviolet, in the visible, in the infrared region. These instruments are called multispectral or even hyperspectral. Hyperspectral means that you cover hundreds of wavelengths, and then you are able to see a lot of variation of different materials and different soils, for instance. And my last slide is about atmospheric analysis. As I mentioned, there the goal is to monitor different atmospheric molecules. Also here, different wavelengths are important, but typically to observe one particular molecule, you want to look at a very narrow bandwidth. Also important here is a very high dynamic range, because concentrations that are very low will give rise to a very small signal. High concentrations will give rise to a higher signal, so all of this needs to be captured by your detector. And finally, you also want a very high light sensitivity, so the noise level within your detector needs to be controlled very well. So this is just briefly, in a nutshell, what parameters are important for an instrument development. Some examples of Earth instruments are Altius. Altius, which is currently under development and which can be seen in the middle. It contains a visual, a near-infrared, and an ultraviolet channel. CLIM is another example, which is a cloud imager. Then, of course, also around other planets, atmospheres can be monitored. For instance, around Mars, the NOMAD instrument has been flown, is still active. And around Venus, a new mission is being defined, which will fly normally around 2030 and which will monitor the volcanic activity on Venus. All of this using spectral instruments. Thank you very much.
We got the tip during the break that it would be nice if people could ask questions, so questions are very welcome. If anybody has any questions for the previous presentation, shoot. Okay, well, then I'm going to thank the 4 speakers. Then the next speaker of today is the heer Nick Verstrijker. I had the pleasure to work with Nick in the past months, and I must say it's impressive how Edgise has become really an expert in artificial intelligence and how relevant that has become for space. So welcome, Nick. I'm looking forward to your presentation. Great.
All right, so yeah, hello everyone. My name is Nick Destrycker, co-founder of Edgise, and I'll give you today a little bit of an overview of what our company does, who we are, and more specifically why we've chosen the space industry. Now I'm going to start my story by telling on why we are designing or solving a problem in space. Space is full of data. You might have heard that in the previous keynotes already. It's actually full of sensors. These sensors become more complicated, so they start designing, so they start generating more data. Now, the problem is that this data generation is increasing exponentially. And the way or the capacity to process that data is not increasing as linear as the generation of the data. Take, for example, these 3 different kinds of space infrastructures. We have space stations, we have launcher systems, and satellites. Now, these 3 different categories, they generate a lot of different kinds of data. being time series, but also more spatial data, like, for example, Earth observation systems. Now, if you think about it, this data is just a bunch of bits and bytes, which we send to Earth. And there it ends up in data centers. Because in the data centers, there is enough processing power available to process all that data. Now, the problem is, this is not scalable and far from being sustainable. We are reaching the limits of the downlink capability. It's becoming a bottleneck. So what we see in the space industry right now, and what our vision also is that why not implement these intelligent algorithms, which we run on the data centers, why not implement them inside of the space infrastructure itself? By doing so, you can already process a lot of the data that is being generated in space before sending it down to Earth, which is a much more sustainable solution. It actually also relieves the stress on our data centers, and of course also on the downlink. Now, it all boils down to the fact that computing raw data close to the sensor is much cheaper than transmitting it to Earth. And what I'm describing here is actually a compute paradigm. It is called edge computing, because we're moving away from the cloud processing to the edge. We're moving away our algorithms from the Earth to space. And to be honest, yeah, edge computing in space is, for me, but also for a lot of other companies, the next frontier of innovation. And we are not alone in that vision. Because here you can see a picture on how a lot of companies, but also a lot of different space agencies, see the future of computing in space. Now, cloud computing will still have its relevance on Earth, of course. But in the future, more and more will be computed in space. And in fact, we might even see different types of, specific type of satellite constellations that do nothing more than computing data. And this is a service they can bring to other types of satellites who don't have the power to process their own data. And other types of satellites, like, for example, Earth observation satellites, but also classic telecom satellites, can all apply to this compute constellation to process their data. Now, we share this vision, and in fact, at Edgise, we envision a future where green intelligence systems bring value to space and to Earth. And this is what we want to contribute to. We, in fact, made it our mission to accelerate this transition to this new world by delivering projects, services, and products supporting the extreme edge computing needs in space and Earth. That's, in fact, what we want to contribute to. So in fact, it boils down to us being a team of engineers designing green, sustainable, intelligent, low-power, embedded artificial intelligence. So we implement the algorithms inside of the space infrastructures. Now, in order to do so, we need a lot of different types of expertises. So in our company, we design the hardware, but also we need to design the software, and we need to design the AI models to have a very efficient type of algorithm and a solution in space. Now, the different types of systems or processing systems that we use for that is ranging from normal CPUs, but also GPUs, FPGAs, TPUs, and recently also a new type of AI hardware, the neuromorphic processing systems. Now, the mission and our vision today is very clear. We know what we want to do, but that was not always the case. I always doubt a little bit whether or not to show this slide because of the left slide being very, how to say, complicated, and the line crisscrossing through a lot of things. But it visualizes perfectly the state of our company in the past. We started out in late 2019 with, in fact, only a focus on our core technology, being edge AI, or edge artificial intelligence. So we didn't focus on a specific type of market or segment, which made us all over the place. We actually had use cases of implementing AI in smart cities, like counting people using AI cameras, but also in the food processing industry, also in the medical equipment for counting biological cells placed underneath microscopes. In fact, we were all over the place, and we had limited focus and limited results also. So that actually changed during 2020, when we came in contact with the VRI, the Vlaamse Ruimtevaartindustrie, and we began to talk to a lot of companies, and we quickly realized that our technology could have a big impact and bring a lot of benefit to the industry, the space industry. And then afterwards, we started our first collaboration together with Antwerp Space to design artificial intelligence for satellite communication. And that was a kickstart for us in the space industry, and quickly followed a number of other projects also. So at the beginning of 2022, so that's this year, we completely overhauled the mission and the vision of Edgise and purely focus right now on the space industry, which is a risk, I know. It's a knife that cuts at both ends, but it's very good for a startup to have a focus and to go towards a goal. And our goal is to have in 2025 a system, an edge AI processing system in orbit. We will not do that by ourselves. Space is something where you can collaborate, where you need to collaborate. And this is also what we do. We start partnerships with companies so that we can reach our goal. The first project, or what launched ourselves inside of the space industry, as I mentioned, was to design artificial intelligence for satellite communication. Or to be more specific, to in fact try to classify signal interference. Now, if you and I are inside of an empty room, we can easily communicate, right? If the room is empty. But if the room is about 5 to 1,000 people, you and I, we start to communicate a little bit more difficult, right? And that's in fact also the case in space. We see that a lot of satellites are being launched, so all these satellites will need to communicate. So interference or disturbances will come more frequently. And the problem of signal interference is already being solved in the past, but by using classical digital signal processing. And we are using artificial intelligence for that, and to be more specific, we design the AI such that it will be deployable on satellites itself. So this is one of the projects that we're currently doing. As I mentioned in the beginning, there is another type of space infrastructure, and it's the launcher systems. This is also something that we're currently in development right now, is in fact to extend the lifetime or the life cycle of a rocket engine. You might know this or not, but a rocket engine is very expensive, and it's not frequently being reused or refurbished. And what is done right now, when a rocket is launched, it will, the engine itself will start collecting sensor data from the different types of sensors that are on the engine itself. And it will send that through to a control room on the ground. After a couple of minutes, there is the stage will fall back down to Earth, either in the ocean, or some companies already land their engines. And then it comes back to the facility to check whether or not it needs to be refurbished together with the data that's being gathered. Now, we've seen that if you implement an AI algorithm inside of a rocket engine, you can in real time process all of the sensor data during the flight and try to actuate the different pumps and valves and all the actuators that are on board of the rocket, you can actuate them in such a way that it will minimize the damage afterwards, so that in fact you can extend the life cycle of an engine. So these are in fact the two types of projects that we are currently working on. And with that being said, I would like to end the presentation by telling that if this story resonates with you as being a company or an individual or a space enthusiast, please do come and talk to us. We cannot do this by ourselves. We need collaborations. We need people who share the same idea and the same vision, so that in fact you and I can go to space together. Thanks.
Any questions for Nick? The mic is on its way. Yeah.
Moet de vraag in het Nederlands of in het Engels kan?
In het Nederlands is perfect.
Mijn vraag is er een gevaar voor hacking in de ruimte?
Dat is een heel interessante vraag. Ja, absoluut. Waar dat er een systeem is dat geconfigureerd kan worden, dat geaccessed kan worden, is er gevaar voor hacking. Absoluut. Dus cybersecurity wordt ook een grote opportuniteit in de toekomst, waar ook wel heel wat zaken mee kunnen gebeuren. Ja.
We hebben een tweede vraag.
Ja, mijn vraag is concreet over het voorbeeld dat u had. Ah ja, English or Dutch?
As you wish.
Whatever. So my question is about the example that you gave. So you have on one hand the raw data that's sent to Earth, and then on the other hand you have your edge AI that processes the data first. My question is, most satellites stay in space for a quite long time. I imagine that the technology and AI of now and 10 years in the future will be completely different. Is the AI itself flexible enough or not? Because when you have the raw data here on Earth, you can change and analyze it however you want, but you lose that flexibility, I think. Or what is your opinion?
What we see is that space agencies right now are also looking more towards in-orbit retraining. So that's such that the models in the future will be able to be retrained with minimal intervention from the ground. Of course, there will always need to be intervention, because it's very much possible that if you leave your model up in orbit and you let it retrain all by itself, that it will converge completely in a different direction that you want. But that is an ongoing activity to see how models can be retrained in orbit to cope with future problems, indeed. Yeah.
Hi, yeah. With the data being processed in space, is there any difficulties in terms of like if there's something unexpected and you want to go and like trace it back to the raw data to find out what went wrong? Is there anything? I mean, maybe the raw data is all just ones and zeros. It's not actually interpretable with humans anyway. But I guess it's if you want to trace back unexpected things, does it make it any harder if it's being processed in space?
That's a good question. In fact, what we are also trying to do right now is to see how certain the model is of its predictions. And when it's not, we need to save the data that it just had processed. So we save that on board on the satellite to eventually, at some point, download it back to see what went wrong. So there are some ideas or procedures that you can apply to see, to gain back the data that has been processed by the model. But it needs to be, before you design the model, you need to, of course, think about that. So yeah, it's also an ongoing activity, but how we solve this is to look at the certainty of the model prediction. Yeah.
Okay, right. Dank u wel, Nick. Up to now, we have been talking about technology, research, upstream, downstream applications, but now we would like to make the switch to education. Education is also a very important aspect for space, and the first speaker in this area is Professor Hugues, who's leading the Department of Natuurkunde en Sterkunde at the KU Leuven. He's the president of the Education Commission of Space Studies. Welcome.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm not leading the department yet, but maybe one day. I'm an astrophysicist. I'm a professor at KU Leuven, and about a year ago, I took over from Christopher Wilkins that set up the program in 2009, and now I am the program director, the person in charge of organizing, with a lot of help, the Master of Space Studies, and this is what I want to talk about right now. All right, I'll make some important notes. So the first thing to know about the Master, this is an advanced Master. That means that the students that are enrolling in our Master already have a diploma, and that diploma can be in actually a lot of different fields. It can be in the law sector, it can be in biomedicals, it can be of any kind of science or of engineering. What we ask from our students is that they are able to project, in a sense, their future self, their motivations to start a career in the space sector, and the Master program is here to help them. So the program is interdisciplinary. It is inter-university, together with the University of Ghent and KU Leuven. It is also inter-faculty, because we need collaboration from the Faculty of Science, of Engineering, and from the Humanities. So you see that the Master itself has all the complexity of a space-based project. Good. That's the other side. All right. So the first goal, of course, is to help the students to start a career in science, and the other goals, of course, is to help our companies, our agencies, and governments to find new talents that have a broad view of space. But before I give you more about the program, let me remind you some of the environment in which the students and the young professionals have to evaluate. If I click here, does it work? Right, so why is place? And the first things, to me as a scientist, it's a place of wonder. And I think that everybody in this room will agree, whether you are young or whether you've been working in the space sector for 40 years, this is still a place that astonishes you almost every day. It's a place that has driven discoveries, our understanding of the world since probably the start of humankind. And it is a place of inspiration for young and older people too. It's probably one of the easiest cells if you want to motivate young girls and boys to start a career in STEM, for example, is to talk to them about the space sector. It's been mentioned earlier, but this space offers us a unique laboratory. It offers us environmental conditions that are very difficult or even impossible to reproduce on Earth, so we can learn a lot from that. It offers us resources from placing assets of communications to maybe in the future mining some asteroids or on the moon. And it is a place of very big, very large geopolitical, geostrategical importance. It's a place where the more beautiful international collaboration can take place, but also it's a place where there are a lot of tensions. Looking downward, it helps us to monitor Earth, plan for climate change, predict the weather forecast, monitor human activities, and support our economies. And I think that in the last 5 minutes, I've touched upon 20 different fields, so this is really showing the very broad and very diverse aspect of space. And so this is basically telling us that the companies, what they need, the governments, what they need, and people that know about space, they know about their own topics, but they should be able to evaluate in a very broad interdisciplinary environment, and to be able to talk with a lot of different actors that are important for their own project. So that's what has guided the creation and what we try to do on basically on the everyday job in the Master of Space Studies, is to equip the students with an interdisciplinary perspective and to help the to answer basically the need of more people tackling or starting a career in the space sector. And we work on two different levels, basically. We broaden the skills of the students, exposing them to many different fields that are often very different from the initial first master. And of course, we also broaden the skills of the students in one of their initial specialization. In more detail, so this is a one-year program, it's 60 ECTS. This is a daytime program, so this is not something that you can do online. It's supposed to be done over 1 year, but people can split it over 2 years in case they, for personal reason or professional reason, they want to try to combine that with a part-time job. I don't think it's advisable to do that as together with a full-time job. So two pillars, basically, a common course, a common set of courses. It's half the program. Those are mandatory courses, and they are broad. They go from law and policy to space technology, to Earth observations that we have heard about, to science from space, and even science from space, it goes from biomedical science to astrophysics to some other aspects. And then 15 ECTS of specialization. Humanities, project management, legal organizations, international organization, legal aspects of space. Science, more science, biology, astrophysics. And then technology, robotics, satellite communications, for example, are some of the specialized courses that the students can take. And the last, but also very important aspect is the master thesis. This, like any master thesis, basically the students choose a project, a complex problem, where the students will apply its skills to try to solve the problem, or at least progress towards a solution. And that can be done in collaboration with researchers at the University of Ghent or the University of Leuven, of course. But we want to be broader than that, and it can be done with collaboration of other research groups in Belgium, and also in collaboration with industry. So I think this year we have 6 students that are doing their master in collaboration with private companies. Just to give you some practical example, and I think that most of the students that I'm displaying here are in the room, so those are examples of master thesis topics. It goes from biology, biomedical applications, to economical aspects, to legal aspects of health risk, for example, and of course, technological aspects related to sensors, to thermal stress of satellite, etc. So this is for the purely academic part of the program. If I may advertise a few other strengths of the program. First is that we have the chance to have some high-profile lecturers. Frank de Win is helping with the program. Sarah Batu, which is the head of the radiology unit at the SKA, is also helping a lot with the program. And then we try to break a little further the world of academia, and non-COVID time, unfortunately, but to bring the students to visit ESTEC, to bring the students to go to Keulen or other places, to bring them to field trips, and to encourage them to attend some of the conference and event in the space sector that are running throughout the academic year, depending on their interest. This is not mandatory, but we support them if they have an interest to go there. All right, so just a few statistics so that you can get to know the program better. So the program started 10 years ago, no more, 12, 13 years ago, 2009. I can't do my math anymore. And for the first 6-7 years, we had a constant income of about 10-12 students. But in the last 3 years, there's a strong increase. And I personally believe that it relates with a lot of the communication that is done at European level, basically. And you see that in the media, that space is actually becoming, well, it's a growing sector that has a growing importance for the future, and that is probably triggering some of our students to, or most students to apply for the program. So a quarter of the students are international, and we are happy to host them here in Belgium. We can, of course, always do better, but this is not a male program. This is something that both genders are equally interested into space, and we certainly want to continue in that direction. And statistics that we just established a few days ago, but we're very proud of, 75% of our students are still working in the space sector, so that shows that it works if you're interested in starting a career in academia. This is not necessarily, starting a career in the space sector, this is not necessarily a bad move. It doesn't harm you too much. All right. In terms of career opportunities, and this is from last year, so sorry if you have alumni that are working in your company, but your logo is not there, but it just shows the breadth of the job opportunities that are there, both from the research institution and academia, but space industries and governmental bodies that are there. All right, so I'm reaching the end of this presentation. I am leaving you with this to read, but I think that we will have the word of an alumni that will talk probably better than I about why she has chosen a career in the space sector and why this is something that everybody in this room should do.
May I welcome Ms. Eleonore Théry, who graduated from the KU Leuven and is now a junior product assurance engineer at OIP Sensor Systems. Welcome.
Click maar door. You forgot some slides, huh? Okay, so I'm going to apologize because I'm the odd one out and I'm going to do my presentation in Dutch since this is the Flemish program that is being presented, so I prepared it in Dutch. So sorry for the people who don't speak Dutch, but bear with me. Oké, laat ik beginnen met mezelf voor te stellen. Ik ben Eleonore, ik ben een relatief recent afgestudeerde handelsingenieur die totaal nog niet klaar was om te beginnen werken en op zoek is gegaan naar een vervolgopleiding en eigenlijk op een heel toevallige manier terecht is gekomen bij de Master of Space Studies. Ik ben momenteel al 1,5 jaar aan het werken bij OIP Sensor Systems, sinds kort OIP Space Instruments, echt specifiek de space afdeling dan. Daar werk ik als Product Assurance Engineer, wat eigenlijk inhoudt dat ik de devil's advocate ben voor Murphy's Law. Voor alles wat met opto-elektrische instrumenten te maken heeft, wat wij bij OIP doen, wat Bart ook al heel mooi heeft uitgelegd. Ik wil niet in herhaling treden en uitleggen wat de Master of Space Studies inhoudt en welke kansen het mij heeft gegeven. Ik wil jullie vooral vertellen waarom ik gekozen heb voor een loopbaan in de ruimtevaart en waarom het fascinerend is om te werken in de ruimtevaart. Zoals ik al zei, ik ben op een heel toevallige manier bij Space terechtgekomen. Ik had als kind, ik moet eerlijk toegeven, ik had als kind geen voorliefde voor Space. Ik was niet gefascineerd in de ruimte. Maar ik wou nog niet gaan werken, daar komt het op neer. Ik ben op zoek gegaan naar vervolgopleidingen. Ik heb eigenlijk heel toevallig in een lijstje op de website van Universiteit Gent zag ik plots staan Master of Space Studies. Ik dacht, dat klinkt supercool. Dus ik had dat verteld aan mijn ouders en die zeiden, oh, wij kennen iemand die op dit moment de masteropleiding volgt. Ik heb met die persoon kunnen praten, die zit momenteel ook in de zaal. En die was laaiend enthousiast en die heeft mij laten inzien dat space veel meer inhoudt dan wat ik op het eerste zicht dacht. En iets wat ik nu ook ervaar, dat heel veel mensen niet... Misschien is dat een beetje moeilijk om verrassend dat ik dat zeg na alles wat we vandaag hebben gezien. Maar heel veel mensen begrijpen niet goed, denk ik, wat ruimtevaart allemaal inhoudt. Het is veel meer dan gewoon astronauten naar de maan sturen of planeten ontdekken die lijken op de aarde, waar misschien leven mogelijk is. Het is iets waar wij elke dag op dagelijkse basis mee in contact komen. En dat is net hetgeen wat voor mij ruimtevaart zo fascinerend maakt. Eigenlijk de voorbije 3 jaar waar ik in ruimtevaart aan het werk ben of met ruimtevaart bezig ben, zijn er 2 dingen, of ja, 1 ding die mij eigenlijk is opgevallen, die bestaat uit 2 delen. Zoals ik al zei, ruimtevaart is veel meer dan de meeste mensen denken. Ik krijg heel snel de vraag, als ik vertel dat ik in de ruimtevaart werk, wanneer ga je naar de maan vliegen? Ik heb daar niks mee te maken. Ik ga ook zelfs geen instrumenten naar de maan sturen. Maar omgekeerd biedt de ruimtevaart ook de mogelijkheid aan heel veel mensen om met verschillende achtergronden om samen te werken aan een groter geheel. En dat is voor mij hetgeen wat ruimtevaart het meest fascinerende maakt. Ik heb de voorbije 3 jaar ben ik in contact gekomen met heel veel verschillende mensen die uit verschillende takken komen. Ook in mijn opleiding, toen ik de Master of Space Studies deed, waren we met 9 studenten, waarvan 5 verschillende nationaliteiten en minstens evenveel verschillende achtergronden. Ik heb het over mensen met achtergrond in communicatiewetenschappen, biomedische wetenschappen, computerwetenschappen, zelfs mensen die psychologie hebben gestudeerd. Ik zelf heb een economische achtergrond. En voor mij is dat net hetgene wat ruimtevaart, werken in de ruimtevaart, is zo fascinerend. Want als kind en als student die een keuze moest maken waar ik wou gaan studeren, dacht ik, oké, ruimtevaart, dat is iets voor mensen die fysica en sterrenkunde kunnen studeren, wat dan nog eens de allermoeilijkste richting is die je kan doen. Niks is minder waar. Ik heb handelsingenieur gestudeerd, operations management als achtergrond. En tot mijn verbazing kan ik heel veel van de dingen die ik in mijn opleiding heb gezien rechtstreeks toepassen op de job die ik vandaag uitvoer. Voor mij was het ook belangrijk toen ik een keuze moest maken waar ik wou gaan werken of waar ik wou terechtkomen later als ik volwassen was of ben. Ik wou graag kunnen meewerken aan iets dat een verschil maakt, dat een oplossing biedt aan de maatschappelijke problemen waar we vandaag mee worden geconfronteerd. We staan voor heel veel veranderingen, veranderingen in onze leefomgeving, veranderingen in ons klimaat. Bij OIP krijg je de kans om mee te werken aan 2 projecten die Bart reeds heeft uitgelegd. Het Altius-project, dat is een satellieteninstrument dat ozon zal meten in bepaalde lagen van de atmosfeer. En ik kan ook meewerken aan het CLIM-project, dat dan deel uitmaakt van een ESA Copernicus-missie, CO2-M-missie, die CO2 zal opmeten in de atmosfeer. Beide projecten, beide missies, dragen rechtstreeks bij tot hoe wij klimaatverandering kunnen observeren en kunnen opvolgen. En dat is iets wat voor mij heel belangrijk was om aan zoiets te kunnen meewerken. Ter voorbereiding van dit seminarie werd mij gevraagd om een titel door te geven. Een kleine brainstorm-sessie met collega's en vrienden leidde tot een aantal voorstellen. A small step for men, a giant leap for women. To boldly go where no woman has gone before. Uiteindelijk ben ik gegaan voor iets minder catchy. Op de slide kun je lezen waarom een loopbaan in de ruimtevaart fascinerend is. Maar ik wil daar graag nog iets aan toevoegen. Een van de dingen die mij het meest is bijgebleven, een kans die ik heb gekregen tijdens de masteropleiding, was het bijwonen van de European Space Policy Conference in Brussel, waar European Commissioner Margrethe Vestager een speech gaf. En zij begon haar speech met de volgende woorden: Ladies and gentlemen, gentlemen, gentlemen. Ik kan helaas niet ontkennen dat ook in OIP, hoewel ik heel veel respect en enorm veel bewondering heb voor mijn collega's, dat ook daar en ook de andere bedrijven waarmee ik al in contact ben gekomen, dat de ratio man-vrouw niet altijd optimaal is. Het is wel opvallend dat een industrie die eigenlijk vrij jong is, toch wordt gekenmerkt en wordt geleid door voornamelijk mannen. Dus daarom ook in het kader van Ladies at Space, die mede-organisator zijn van dit event. En deze ochtend heb ik de kans gehad om met een 100-tal jonge dames te spreken en het te overtuigen om een carrière te kiezen in de ruimtevaartindustrie. Wil ik graag afsluiten met volgende titel, wat ik hoop dat ik jullie heb mogen bijbrengen vandaag, is dat ruimtevaart niet alleen fascinerend is, maar het is ook innoverend, stimulerend, het is verbindend. Ruimtevaart wordt gekenmerkt door letterlijk en figuurlijk grensoverschrijdende samenwerkingen en enorm veel passie. En dus daarom deze samenvatting voor wat ik jullie heb vandaag mogen vertellen. Waarom willen jonge vrouwen kiezen voor een loopbaan in de ruimtevaart? Dank je wel.
En dan, last but not least, zou ik zeggen, hebben we ook nog professor Katrien Kolenberg bij ons. Zij zit aan de faculteit van wetenschappen in de KU Leuven en is nationaal coördinator van ECERO in België. Professor Kolenberg, aan u het woord.
Hello, everyone. Thank you. The presentation that I'm going to give, together with some distinguished guests here, will be mixed English-Dutch. I hope that's okay. So everyone speaks whatever they want to speak. Okay, so we're going to talk about space for STEM. But let's first wake you up a bit, or it's late in the day. I'm just curious also, by a show of hands, who works in the space industry here in this room? Okay, it's a good fraction. Thank you. Who would like to work in the space industry? Yeah, some people raised their hands twice. Yeah, who is a student, a university student? Super, thank you. And who is still in high school, in secondary school? Hello there. Okay, perfect. So we have a very nice mix here today, and actually all the previous fantastic talks have illustrated how relevant space is. Space is out there, but it is not out there, because we have a lot of challenges right now on Earth that space can help us solve. Risk assessment, crisis management, climate change, you name it, safety. This is all something that space can contribute to, and that's why a vocation to choose for space is very natural. This image by ESA Education shows how space is actually a very interdisciplinary endeavor. Of course, we've heard that you can get into the space business with very different backgrounds. That's also why the Master of Space Studies is such an interdisciplinary program. But of course, how do you get there? You don't get there coming out of high school. Actually, you get the formation in high school. And for those of you who are in high school, and also for those of you who are here and who are studying, you've certainly heard of the term STEM, standing for science, technology, engineering, mathematics, sometimes extended to STEAM, because of course you need to be creative to find solutions for the problems that we have today. And so space is actually a perfect gateway to STEM. And STEM is a bit of a hype in schools. If you use space to bring STEM subjects and to show this interdisciplinarity in schools, that really works. And today I also stand here with my hat of the manager of ECERO Belgium. What is ECERO? ECERO stands for the European Space Education Resource Office. And it is an office that is basically the school program of the European Space Agency. And we are supported by ESA and also by BELSPO, the Belgian the Belgian Science Policy Office, not only space, it's the Science Policy Office, and several European member states of ESA, they have an ECERO office. And so we have this office actually based here at the KU Leuven. So we are the prime contractor with ESA. But of course, for Belgium is a small but quite a complex country with a very flourishing space industry. So we work together with partners. We team up with the Volkssterrenwacht Armampien, which is connected to the University of Ghent, to manage the program for Flanders. And we team up with La Scientothèque, which is a non-profit in Brussels, also very concerned about education and diversity in education, connected to the Université Libre de Bruxelles. And they help us manage the French and the German-speaking part of Belgium. And of course, Belgium is much broader than these primary contractors of ESA, so we are working together with a very big array of partners, among whom the Flemish space industry, the VRI, because it's very important when you bring space to school that you really can show how space is really in action here in Flanders and in Belgium. So what does ISERO do? Well, we want to help teachers to bring STEM in the school through the space context, because the teachers are the real heroes who are doing the work in the schools, and the next heroes, the next generation of heroes, are the pupils. So what we do, we are creating lesson material, often in collaboration with the teachers, because you have to know what works in the classroom, and very often scientists who are doing research, they might not know exactly what the teachers have to abide to when they teach. We are also offering trainings to teachers so that can help them to bring space to the classroom. And we also encourage teachers and their school teams to participate in projects or to come up with their own projects. And this goes actually from kindergarten over primary school up to secondary school. But I think the people here today are mostly upper secondary. They're close to making a choice for their future studies. And today I want to really highlight some heroes in the classroom, both teachers and pupils, who are already implementing space at school. So I want to give the floor to Erik de Schrijver, a teacher from the St. Peter's College in Jette, who is here with several of his pupils who are doing fantastic work in the classroom.
Thank you, Professor Kolenberg. I'm not so sure if what we do is fantastic. I'll let the audience be the judge of that. Thank you for your attendance. I'll speak in English. I'll let my students do the talking in Dutch. No particular reason. It's just the way we decided to do things. We have started with hands-on space education projects at St. Peter's College in Jette, that's in the northwestern part of Brussels. At the very lowest level in 2004, we had passive biology experiments, which was not really my cup of tea. I'm an alumnus of this university, but I'm a physicist by training, so biology is really not my thing. But that was the best we could do at the time. I'd found an organization in the United States that was willing to fly these passive biology experiments on weather balloons to the edge of space. And as I would come to discover in the years after that, flight opportunities is really a must-have for a growing space program in high school. 15 years later, fast forward, because I'm very short in time, and we're flying gamma spectroscopy instruments to the edge of space. In 2019 on a scientific balloon that was carrying a total of 150 kilograms worth of instruments, 2 to 3 kilograms of which were ours. I would like to use this time to thank a couple of people in the room here for their unwavering support throughout the years. This mission to Sweden with students in 2019 would not have been possible without the support of the sponsors that you see mentioned down there, so thank you again for that support. Some of the students are now at this university studying physics and have already made plans to join the young graduate trainee program from ESA and other programs. Okay, so starting small and small incremental steps, not possible without flight opportunities. I'm happy to say that since 2011 we have a program in Belgium in cooperation with the Royal Meteorological Institute that is open to second and third degree students from secondary schools worldwide. We have in the past had teams, and we will have teams this year from Spain, Portugal, and 2 teams from the UK. We have had teams from Italy, Japan, Nigeria. They missed the deadline this year, or they probably would have been joining us as well, Poland and the United States. Deadline for proposals is November 11th every single year. Flights usually take place in April, and the president of the jury making the selection of the project proposals is none less than Dirk, who is not only Belgium's first astronaut, but who actually started his career as an engineer at the Belgian Institute for Space Aeronomy, developing instruments for high-altitude balloons. So he knows exceedingly well what he's talking about. Okay, I'm done talking. I'm going to give the word to my students who are working on the 3 prime projects that our school is having this year. The first of which is strains. Alec will tell you more about that. He is preparing his end of study work in physics on this one. Alec?
Hello everyone. I will be doing my presentation in Dutch. Eind augustus vertrekt er vanuit het noorden van Zweden op de lanceerbasis van de European Space Range bij Kiruna een grote wetenschappelijke ballonvlucht met een lading van 150 kilogram. Daarvan is ongeveer 3 kilogram van strains materiaal. En in dat pakket zit er een gamma spectrometer, een 3D SSPD-meter, solid state particle detector en een 3D Geiger-Müller-teller. En ik zelf werk aan het succes van de eerste gamma spectrometer die we hebben meegestuurd in 2019, die al heeft gevlogen. Naast een aantal hardware- en software-updates aangebracht aan de gamma spectrometer, zijn er ook een aantal nieuwe instrumenten die meevliegen als experimenten. Dat zijn de 3D Solid State Particle Detector. En dat is van type met een geëncapsuleerde fotodiode. En mogelijk vliegt er ook een filterwiel mee, gemaakt uit 5 verschillende types metalen. En we gaan dus de afschermende werking tegen straling van die metalen onderzoeken op verschillende hoogtes in de atmosfeer. Bovendien vliegt er ook een magnetometer mee. Deze magnetometer zal de oriëntatie van meetinstrumenten bepalen rondom een verticale as, waardoor we de zon als mogelijke bron van straling kunnen identificeren. We proberen ook, we zijn aan het proberen om onze data in real-time naar de grond te krijgen, maar dat is een probleem dat vooral gelegen ligt bij Ethernet-protocollen. En dat is iets waar ik zelf persoonlijk niet aan meewerk. Het grote doel is dus om een goed beeld te krijgen van harde X- en zachte gammastraling van zowel endo- als exogene oorsprong in de atmosfeer. En daarvoor is er dus de hele set van complementaire meettoestellen dat we meesturen, strains. Nu geef ik het woord aan Katy. En de meneer Schrijver.
Staat een foutje in deze slide, dank u. Er staat een foutje in deze slide en de fysicus die ik ben schaamt zich diep. Daar moet staan 10 tot 3000 kilo elektronvolt en niet mega-elektronvolt. Goed, normaal zou ik nu het woord geven aan Marien Bijaert, maar Marien is ziek en in quarantaine. Zij zit eveneens, net zoals Alec, in 6 wetenschappen wiskunde, werkt aan een eindwerk, ook op diezelfde geëncapsuleerde fotodioden. Maar waar het eindwerk van Alec zeer wetenschappelijk is in opzet, is dat van Marien veel technologischer. Zij probeert de schakeling die nodig is om die detector te gebruiken zo sterk te miniaturiseren dat die later dit jaar met een sondeerraket tot in de ruimte moet kunnen gebracht worden. Het doosje dat u ziet in de ronde raketring zeg maar, gemonteerd staan is minder dan 10 centimeter groot. U ziet hier de voorloper van deze schakeling, moet een hoogte bereiken van 250 kilometer en het stralingsniveau gaan opmeten in functie van de hoogte. De uitdaging hier is het opstartcircuit, want er wordt geen enkel signaal gegeven aan de hardware dat de raket vertrekt. En ja, lanceringen worden wel eens uitgesteld, dus je kan niet het instrument op voorhand aanzetten en wachten tot de lancering doorgaat, want dan riskeert de batterij plat te zijn. Anderzijds kan je ook niet wachten op een startsignaal, want dat komt er nooit, dus dat was wel een uitdaging. We denken dat we eruit zijn, maar we gaan wel testen. Het laatste project, Katrien, is voor jou.
Hallo allemaal, ik ben Katrien Koralzak en ik zit in de richting 5 Latijn Wetenschappen van het Sint-Pieters College. En Peregrinus is eigenlijk een project die geselecteerd is naast andere projecten om in de tweede helft van december mee te gaan met de Ariane 6-raket. En ze zal eigenlijk minder dan 0,5 kilogram wegen. Het doel van Peregrinus is om eigenlijk het aardmagnetisch veld te meten en natuurlijk ook de intensiteit van de X- en gammastralen en dan natuurlijk ook een verband. De data zullen we hier krijgen of ontvangen op aarde via Iridium. En Iridium is een netwerk van satellieten en hierdoor zullen we dus de gegevens hier op aarde krijgen. En wanneer Peregrinus zal losgelaten worden in de ruimte, zal die zich eigenlijk bevinden rond een lage baan rond de aarde met een hoogte van 580 kilometer. Wij worden ook nog ondersteund door de stedelijke humaniora van Dilsen. Die zal zorgen voor de iridiumcommunicatie. En daarnaast worden wij ook nog gesteund door l'Institut Vallée-Bailly, die zal zorgen voor de batterij van Peregrinus. Ikzelf werk voor het circuit, dus ik en mijn team gaan alles zo compact mogelijk moeten maken. En hierdoor zorgt dit experiment ervoor dat wij heel technologisch bezig gaan zijn, omdat wij alles zo compact mogelijk moeten krijgen. En daarnaast gaan we ook heel wetenschappelijk bezig zijn, dus bijvoorbeeld met straling en het aardmagnetisch veld. En ik wou nog gewoon graag mijn mening zeggen over dit project. En dat is dat ik heel blij ben dat ik hier aan mag deelnemen. En ook omdat ik maar in het 5e jaar zit. En voilà.
En in dit project uiteraard komt dan de wetenschap van het Strange-project en de technologie van Edgise samen. Hier toch nog even graag een woord van dank aan de sponsors. De reizen en de technologie zijn niet gratis, maar die steun wordt heel erg geapprecieerd. Dank u wel. En als ik even mag inpikken op wat de jonge dame van OIP daar gezegd heeft, als wij ooit de kans krijgen een instrument naar de maan te sturen, wij gaan niet weigeren. Dank u.
Zijn er vragen? Are there questions for this group? If not, then I'd like to give the floor to the next team of teachers. Please take the floor. Actually, they were teaching today until almost 3 p.m. in Antwerp, and then they took the train to come here, especially to present their programs, the Skills Lab in Space. So, thank you for coming.
We zullen zien of dat het werkt. Het is een proef. We zijn hier net aangekomen, dus we gaan het proberen. Wij doen Skills Lab. Skills Lab is eigenlijk een manier om burgerschap aan te bieden aan leerlingen. Wij zijn van het Stedelijk Lyceum Waterbaan, zoals mevrouw het al gezegd heeft. En wij doen een aantal projecten. Dus ik ben Dirk Saïs, ik ben leerkracht STEM, maar er is al vaak gezegd, er is interdisciplinariteit nodig. Dus ik heb mijn collega Kurt Aarde meegebracht en die is leerkracht Engels. Dus ik geef... Wat doen wij in Skills Lab? Wij geven actief burgerschap. Wij hebben het idee opgevat dat onderwijs meer moet zijn dan gewoon mensen voorbereiden op verdere studies, maar ook voor maatschappij. De mensen uit het secundair komen moeten klaar zijn voor het maatschappij. Zoals de oude Grieken ook al zeiden, we leren mensen in de maatschappij mee te gaan. Ze waren de eerste die naar de sterren keken. Ze zijn ook naar dat onderwijs gaan kijken. Ons Skills Lab is eigenlijk ervaringsgericht. We willen de kennis gaan laten toepassen. De leerstof in het onderwijs wordt verweven in een groter geheel. In deze is dus de ruimtevaart, wat dus prikkelend werkt voor de leerlingen. En je ziet ook dat wij de theorie en de praktijk willen mengen. We gaan dus de theorie die wij in fysica, chemie, biologie en andere vakken geven, gaan wij dus ook in de praktijk toepassen. En we willen niet dat ze ons heel vaak in het secundair geven alleen testen. We willen die dan ook laten gebruiken en die willen vormgeven. Dus toepassen gaan we van aangeleerde leerstof gaan we in de maatschappij laten gebruiken. En we gaan dus ook proberen samenwerken met de maatschappij, wat in de laatste jaren wat mislukt is, omdat iedereen weet wat het probleem was de laatste jaren. Ik geef het woord aan Kurt Aarde.
Hello iedereen and good afternoon. The reason we're doing this in 2 languages because, well, basically that is Skills Lab. Behind me you can see the process we go through. So we have a couple of projects each year. One of them obviously is space, which is why we're here. But they, from the 3rd grade onwards, they have things like social media, money, we have identity, and like we said, space. What we do is we have an introduction, then we start investigating, we do a little experiment, and then they have to write about it because, like my colleagues sort of mentioned, because of Corona, perhaps you're ill next week and then the rest of the team still needs to know what you've done. So being able to write a good report is essential these days because then the next week they can look at your report, see, oh, that's what they've been doing, and that's important. Step 5 is sort of working together. Suddenly everyone who's been doing something sort of has to work together. We like to use actions. Again, Corona has limited us, but we're trying to do something. We've been volunteering, for instance, and one of the projects we've been using is space, which I'll show in a bit more detail. So we started with a bit of entertainment because why not? The film The Martian was actually quite good because all the 3 major things we're going to do, we have 3 domains. We have economy, we obviously have STEM, and we also have human sciences, which incorporate culture studies. So they all are trying to find out how can we use, let's say, space to our own advantage. So from the 2nd week onwards, the people who do economy were thinking, why don't we have the first intergalactic space agency? So what they were doing was developing their own leaflets, etc. The people from human sciences were discovering that stress in space is actually a major key player, but not necessarily a bad thing, and that you can work on how to deal with stress. And then the scientific group thought, how easy would it be to communicate with Mars? So they started working with Arduinos and trying to get a connection to Mars. After that, there's the presentation, and we are kindly, we got some people from the TED in Antwerp to sort of support us for the first year, and now what we do is we give our own expert presentations. So these students who have been doing this for 3 weeks will then teach, let's say that you are the rest of the students. I've just worked on, I'll just say economy, and I will now explain what I've been doing because after 3 weeks I sort of know. And then the next step, what we're doing is an action. In this case, we're trying to use a Mars habitat, and we're using Tinkercad. More about that later. I always have an anxiety when I have to click links on PowerPoints, but we'll see if it works. Oh, the video is embedded.
You want to show the video already?
Yeah.
Yes.
So these are 3 students from us. I'll let them explain, and then I'll give a bit more context.
That we did was take a stress test. Firstly, when you experience stress, it doesn't mean that you are weak. Stress is a normal and natural thing. Secondly, it is very useful to deal with stress because stress is an individual and social problem. For the 3rd step, we went on a space mission. The purpose of the space mission was to see how we would deal with stress. We were locked in a bicycle cellar for 2 hours and did several tasks in a small square in pairs of 4. One of the assignments was a riddle. The lights in the room were off and the door was closed. We were given a flashlight so it wasn't completely dark. Also, our hand was tied to our ankle, which made the assignments not go so smoothly. So, to sum up, going on a real space mission is a lot more stressful than what we actually did. A lot of astronauts deal with stress and anxiety, and this shows that when astronauts are isolated, it has a major impact on their physical and their mental performance.
In the economics domain, we had to pretend that we are a company that offers holiday in space. We also learned how to make a business model and a leaflet.
We allowed to use all our fantasies. I like doing it myself because I had never done it before.
We first researched how to communicate with Mars. We did that with the help of programming. But before that, we had to put these words that we wanted to communicate into computer language. Through that, we could relay the words in the form of radio waves that we then later could use in Mars. What I liked the most was when we programmed with an Arduino.
So, ik was dus in het Nederlands bezig. Dus we proberen dus vaardigheden die ze op school leren ook te gebruiken in dingen waar dat ze, dus in de ruimte, dus leren over stress. Wat is stress? En we gebruiken dat dan ook om experimenten mee te doen. Als actie, zoals wij zeiden, we ronden altijd af met iets dat we naar de buitenwereld kunnen tonen. Dus waarom dan niet een Marsbasis of een Marshabitat laten bouwen in Tinkercad? Natuurlijk, we doen die actie ook omdat ze zo dingen leren die ze normaal niet in een normaal schoolprogramma leren. Tinkercad staat meestal, of 3D-tekenen staan meestal niet in een normaal schoolprogramma. Dus via de uitdaging van bouw nu eens je eigen Marshabitat, hoe dat eruit ziet, krijg je dus leerlingen aan de slag met Tinkercad en 3D-design, waar dat ze normaal, als je dat in een normale context geeft, zoiets heeft van, waarom doen we dat nu weer? Natuurlijk, het is geen spelletje, het is niet, we doen eens een projectje. Vaak zijn projecten zoiets on the side van een school. Bij ons is dat wel het centrum van onze visie, van het is niet alleen theorie, het moet ook toegepast worden. Dus we geven de ruimte dus als ruimte voor burgerschapsstrijding, een actief burgerschapsvisie die we gebruiken, maar er wordt ook heel wat kennis opgedaan. Ik heb wat eindtermen gegeven, dat is vrij belangrijk voor mensen die in het onderwijs staan. Dus er wordt hier en daar wel iets aangeleerd aan de leerlingen, zonder dat ze het eigenlijk altijd heel goed beseffen. Dus als er nog vragen zijn, ik wil best antwoorden.
Thank you. Any questions for this team? If not, then thank you for the great work. So, yeah, just to sum up, there's a lot you can do at school, in the classroom, and these were two wonderful examples of very different types of projects that are happening already in Belgium. And if you want to do this at school, if you're in school, you can always tell your teachers, or if you're your teacher, they can also get in touch with us or with these teachers who are already doing this project. For example, Erik, you manage a project yourself, the project Aschteren, which is open to all schools, actually worldwide. Okay, so to end this wonderful event is part of the precursor week to the Belgian Space Week, a week during which we want to celebrate the fact that 30 years ago Dirk went up for the first time and 20 years ago Frank de Winne. And we hope that in 10 years we'll have a next Belgian astronaut who is already there or scheduled to go up. But please stay tuned for the week of the 16th to the 21st of October, because then there will be more activities to celebrate space in our country. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Katrien, for this group of people who joined us today. It's fantastic to see the dynamics and the passion that is put into this program. Well, some closing remarks for the day. Well, I believe we started this morning with a message from Minister Krivits that there is a real space program in Flanders now, which is unique and the start of hopefully something bigger. We then had Frank de Winne, who inspired us about the space environment, and I believe indeed, the ideas for a next astronaut will hopefully continue that story in the future. We had Nathalie Leijs, who explained us how to live on Mars, which was also inspiring in a sense how research can really contribute to what we try to achieve in space. Then we had Jens Kaufmann from ESA, who explained how ESA is actually helping small and medium enterprises to play an important role in the European space landscape. And after the break, we spoke to a group of speakers constructed by VITO, Eurosense, and OIP, who explained us how Earth observation data can really help to build very concrete applications that have a societal impact. Then we had Nick Destrycker from Edgise, who explained what it's been to be a startup in space and all the hurdles and opportunities that you get there. And we then made the switch to the education, where we started with the Master in Space program, thanks to Prof. Hugues, who clearly explained it to us. And we made the switch to the secondary schools, where the STEM education is really playing a very important role nowadays. So I believe these students that we heard, they have a real ambition to build a career in space. And with that, I think the circle is round. And we are sure that this sector will flourish definitely furthermore in the future. So I hope you had a very interesting afternoon, all of you. And I would like to thank you very much for being here and paying attention to all the speakers. Thank you very much. We have a reception now at 6. We are quite well on time. And you're obviously all very welcome to join the reception. Have a nice evening.